Europe is colder than it wants to admit. Not just because of winter, but because the illusion it lived under has finally cracked. For years, European leaders spoke with moral certainty, sanctioning, lecturing, posturing. Now the bills are due. Energy is scarce, industry is bleeding, and the confidence that once defined Brussels has quietly evaporated. What we're watching isn't a policy adjustment. It's a reckoning. What strikes me first is how fast arrogance turns into silence. The European Union built its entire post-Cold War identity on the idea that it was indispensable, ethical, and immune to consequence. That belief collapsed the moment Europe chose to sever itself from cheap Russian energy and replace it with an arrangement that was never designed to serve European interests. It wasn't diversification. It was submission, wrapped in transatlantic rhetoric. The shift began with sanctions. The official narrative was moral punishment. The real mechanism was economic self-harm. By abandoning Russian pipeline gas, Europe voluntarily walked into dependence on liquefied natural gas shipped across the Atlantic, priced by U.S. producers with zero incentive to offer allies any relief. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a structural trap. LNG is expensive by nature. Transport, liquefaction, regasification, every step adds cost. And Europe accepted all of it, believing Washington would act as a benevolent partner rather than a profit-maximizing power. What followed was predictable. Energy prices spiked. Steel, chemicals, fertilizers, the backbone of European industrial strength, lost competitiveness almost overnight. German manufacturers, once the pride of the continent, began relocating production abroad. Not because they wanted to, but because survival demanded it. Factories closed. Supply chains fractured. The industrial heart of Europe started hollowing out in real time. This is the part many commentators avoid. The energy decision didn't just hurt Europe economically. It stripped the continent of leverage. When your energy comes through fixed pipelines, you negotiate long-term stability. When it arrives on tankers' priced spot market, you're a hostage to volatility. Today, more than half of Europe's gas imports come as U.S. LNG. That figure alone explains why European leaders sound different now. Listen closely to Berlin, Paris, Rome. The tone has changed completely. Figures who once framed Russia as an irredeemable pariah are now using words like dialogue, necessity, European partner. This isn't ideological evolution. It's pressure. Pressure from voters, from industries, from balance sheets that no longer add up. And there's another reality shaping this reversal: Ukraine. The war that was sold as strategically manageable has become strategically lost from the Western perspective. Russian advances near Kupiansk and Pokrovsk aren't symbolic. They signal momentum. Every additional month of fighting worsens Europe's negotiating position, not Russia's. Moscow knows this. That's why the Kremlin isn't rushing to answer phone calls. Dmitry Peskov's response captured it perfectly. Talks can happen to understand positions, not to listen to lectures. Translation: Russia isn't interested in European remorse unless it comes with structural concessions. And those concessions go far beyond gas prices. At this point, the analysis shifts from description into something more uncomfortable. Europe isn't deciding whether to change course. It's deciding whether it still has the agency to do so. Because Washington's strategic focus has already moved. U.S. national security now prioritizes Asia. NATO spending expectations are shifting. Europe is being asked to pay more, commit more, and accept less, all while buying energy at premium prices from the same partner demanding sacrifice. So the dilemma becomes existential. Does Europe remain a loyal appendage of a transatlantic order that no longer prioritizes it? Or does it accept humiliation now to regain autonomy later by reintegrating with the Eurasian economic space? What many people overlook is that Russia's offer isn't just cheaper gas. It's predictability. Decades of uninterrupted supply. Fixed infrastructure. Long-term contracts. A security logic built on geography rather than ideology. Compare that with LNG markets driven by speculation and geopolitical mood swings, and the contrast is stark. Halfway through this analysis, I want to pause on one question that rarely gets asked openly. If energy policy is supposed to serve citizens and industry, who exactly benefited from Europe's energy pivot? And when you think about that answer, it might be worth sharing how you see it playing out from where you live. There are examples elsewhere that make Europe's paralysis even more glaring. Canada, under Mark Carney, quietly adjusted its stance toward China, lowering tariffs and asserting economic sovereignty despite U.S. pressure. It wasn't framed as betrayal. It was framed as realism. Europe, by contrast, remains locked in reflexive Russophobia and Sinophobia, even as farmers protest in the streets and populist movements surge in response to elite denial. The social consequences are no longer abstract. Industrial demand destruction is real. Energy-intensive companies are leaving. Skilled jobs are disappearing. What's left behind is resentment, and a growing sense that European elites would rather freeze the continent than admit their strategic miscalculation. If you're still here, it probably means you're not satisfied with headline explanations or moral slogans. You're trying to understand why the system feels like it's grinding against itself. The Kremlin understands this moment well. Russia isn't just waiting. It's setting terms. For gas to flow again through the steel arteries of Nord Stream, Moscow has been explicit. No partial fixes. No symbolic gestures. Full removal of technological and financial sanctions on Gazprom and the broader energy sector. Restoration of access to SWIFT. Unfreezing of Russian assets held in European banks. This isn't punishment. It's a reset demand. From Moscow's perspective, Europe broke the contract first, politically and economically. Trust, once shattered, doesn't return through press conferences. It returns through irreversible actions. There's also a broader strategic layer here. A genuine European reset would require something even more radical, a new pan-European security architecture. One that acknowledges NATO's failure to provide indivisible security and recognizes that permanent militarization under U.S. command has made Europe less safe, not more. That would mean asking Washington to withdraw its troops and bases, over 100,000 soldiers whose presence now symbolizes dependence rather than protection. Before closing, there's a harder question worth sitting with. If the real danger to European stability isn't Russia, but a dependency that turns allies into captive markets, how long can Europe avoid confronting that truth? And how do you think voters will respond if leaders keep postponing the answer? The conclusion is unavoidable. Winners and losers are already visible. The United States secured profits and leverage through LNG. Russia preserved strategic patience and energy credibility. Europe lost competitiveness, autonomy, and time. Historically, this mirrors other moments when declining powers clung to moral narratives while material conditions collapsed underneath them. Europe still has a path forward, but it's narrow and uncomfortable. It runs through Moscow, through Beijing's technology, through Mercosur food security, and away from the fantasy that moral superiority pays energy bills. Multipolarity isn't a theory anymore. It's the environment. Sovereignty isn't requested. It's exercised. And every winter that passes without a decision makes the price higher. At some point, the old order stops collapsing because it's pushed, and starts collapsing because it can no longer stand on its own. That moment is closer than many in Brussels want to admit. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're tracking the evolution of this story day by day. Make sure to activate notifications, and don't miss our next report. And remember, you can now become a channel member. If you believe in this project and want to see it grow, your support makes all the difference. If you'd like to support our channel financially, which we greatly appreciate, you can do so through Patreon and PayPal. The link is in the video description.